Our Mueller cooperator Robert Gates back in court to testify against former White House counsel. Top Mueller cooperator and star trial witness Robert Gates had it easier his second time around. Testifying Thursday at the second criminal trial since reaching his plea deal with federal prosecutors, Gates appeared at ease, even good-humored, as he spoke about former Obama White House counsel Greg Craig and his interactions with Paul Manafort's Ukrainian lobbying operation. Manafort and Gates, who in the summer of 2016 directed Donald Trump's presidential campaign, were two of the highest-profile defendants in special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. At the time that Mueller's Office of Special Counsel ended its work last spring, it had passed several of the federal investigations it started on two other U.S. attorneys. The Craig case, in which the White House lawyer-turned-private attorney is accused of hiding his efforts for Ukraine from the federal government, was among those spin-off matters. The Craig case is also an attention-getter for a foreign lobbying enforcement unit at the Justice Department that was reinvigorated during Mueller's investigation. Prosecutors and defense attorneys on Thursday led Gates through a retelling of his plea and cooperation deal with Mueller, his time as Manafort's number two and his various swindles before he came clean. Though Gates has finished helping prosecutors in the Craig case, he could be called to testify again in November against former Trump advisor Roger Stone. That case appears to have less to do with Manafort's lobbying operation, and could reveal what President Trump knew during his 2016 campaign about WikiLeaks and the damaging hack of the Democrats. The questioning of Gates kicked off just before 10 a.m. Thursday, and his more than 4 hours in the witness box filled the jury's day. Among the first questions, did he know Paul Manafort? Manafort, the Trump campaign chair in 2016, was not called to testify against Craig. Mueller had secured a plea deal from Manafort about a half-year after Gates, yet Manafort's cooperation fell apart when he lied to the grand jury and prosecutors about several topics. Throughout the Craig trial, prosecutors have used other witnesses, like Gates and a technology specialist from Craig's law firm, to show jurors emails sent to her from Manafort, who directed the Ukraine work. Manafort is currently serving the 7.5-year prison sentence for financial and lobbying-related crimes. Gates spoke largely about his efforts to develop a public relations plan for a report by Craig's firm on the 2011 trial of a Ukrainian political figure. Gates and Manafort wanted news coverage of that report to land softly for then-Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, and they allegedly coordinated with Craig to spin journalists. Craig's law firm Skadden, ARP's, Slate, Meter and Flom, in fact, received more than $4 million from a Ukrainian to produce the supposedly independent report. Gates said Thursday that he had sent one wire transfer to Skadden from Manafort's Black Sea View Limited shell account in Cyprus, after the money came from their client abroad. The New York Times article about the report in which Craig was quoted wasn't the greatest, but at least was viewed neutrally and influenced other media coverage of Skadden's report favorably for Manafort's clients, Gates said. From our standpoint, the success of it was very great, he added. Gates, now clean-shaven, naturally frowns when he's being questioned. But his answers Thursday were lengthy, not standoffish, and he often turned to speak directly to the jury. It was a notable difference from his disposition in the pressure cooker courtroom where Gates had testified a year ago against his longtime boss and took a pummeling during questions from Manafort's defense lawyer. Manafort was convicted at that trial. Even so, on Thursday, Gates again admitted to several crimes for which he will not be charged, because of his plea deal. Defense attorney Paul Jungens, arms crossed, asked him, "You lied." "Lied," Gates quickly responded. He hid his own foreign bank accounts from federal regulators, lied on his tax filings in 2010 through 2013, lied to banks in order to borrow money, lied to Visa to raise his credit limit, and stole directly from Manafort, he said Thursday. In all, Gates' stated income on his tax returns omitted more than $1 million. "I didn't pay the full amount of taxes," he said under oath. He later came clean to the IRS before reaching his plea deal, he said. Those were in addition to the financial crimes he helped Manafort commit. But 2016 was a cleaner year. Gates said the tax return he filed then, the year he worked for the Trump campaign, was a good tax return. He also said that he had not submitted expenses to steal from the Trump campaign or from the 2016 inauguration. When Jungens asked whether he had, that question had been unresolved at the Manafort trial when Gates testified there. During that testimony, Gates admitted to stealing money from Manafort. When he was asked then under oath whether he had submitted personal expenses to the inaugural committee for reimbursement, he said he didn't recall and that it was possible. Gates pleaded guilty in February 2018 to 2 criminal charges for conspiring with Manafort and making a false statement to Mueller's team. His plea was a significant reduction from the dozens of criminal charges he initially faced from Mueller. Gates laughed quickly when asked about the extent of his cooperation with federal prosecutors. Over the last 18 months, he said, he's met with federal investigators 40 or more times, for this and other matters. He said he's been largely unemployed since he became a cooperator with Mueller in February 2018. "I agreed to tell the truth. I agreed to provide documents and other materials to the government, and I agreed to help them at trials, including Manafort's last August." At one point, the prosecutor asks Gates what would happen if he lied on the stand. "I think the judge would find it not good, and also the government could tear up my plea agreement," Gates said, sitting feet away from the judge who will sentence him, Amy Berman Jackson. His sentencing date has not yet been set.
Oligarchs. And I may be wrong about this, but I think this is also the first official representation by the government that Manafort's business was staffed up in Moscow. Manafort himself has always described his business as operating in Ukraine. He's always described himself as having no Russian business ties, but the special counsel is now saying in this court filing that Manafort was paid millions of dollars by Russian oligarchs and that his business had staff in Moscow. Now, again, the purpose of this document is pretty specific. This is listing the special counsel's evidence that Paul Manafort and Rick Gates should be strictly supervised, that they should be on permanent home confinement, as it says in the terms of their release. Part of the way the government argues for that is by describing the financial resources that Manafort and Gates have at their disposal if either of them ever did decide to flee. Now, what's interesting about this declaration from the special counsel is that it sounds like they have tracked down every last iota of financial information about Manafort and Gates. And part of what they have turned up thus far is that Manafort and Gates have each made wildly different public representations as to how much they're worth, as to how much money they have. Well, let's start with Gates here, and then we'll do Manafort after. Here's what this document unsealed by the court tonight says about Gates. Quote, recently, in a February 2016 application for a line of credit, Gates listed his and his wife's net worth as $30 million. He listed his own liquid net worth as $25 million. That said, other documents provide conflicting information. 1 month after that credit line application in March 2016, Gates made a residential loan application in which he listed his total assets and that of his wife as 90% less than that. Listed his total assets and that of his wife as approximately $2.6 million. 1/10 what he had said just the previous month. In connection with a loan in 2011, Gates estimated his total assets to be approximately $2.2 million. So quite wildly different representations by Rick Gates as to how much money he had, whatever that means. But check out what they say about Manafort. Quote, Manafort's financial holdings are substantial, if difficult to quantify, precisely because of his varying representations. Manafort has represented the value of his assets on loan applications and other financial documents in divergent amounts. For example, in November 2016 and January 2017, he said his net assets were approximately $25 million. But before that, in August 2016, he listed the value of his assets as $63 million. And in a different application, also that same month in August 2016, he listed his assets as $28 million. 3 months before that, he represented his assets to be $42 million. The month before that, he represented his assets to be his assets to be $48 million. The previous year, in April 2015, he said he was worth $35 million. You know, and maybe all of this is true. Maybe between March 2016, when he joined the Trump campaign, and 2 months later, Paul Manafort did triple his net worth. And then somehow 3 months later, by the time he was getting kicked off the Trump campaign, he'd lost $100 million, right? Maybe it's true, and it's been a mad roller coaster of Paul Manafort in terms of his net assets. But these new filings unsealed by the special counsel's office and the court tonight show you, at the very least, the special counsel has got valuations of the assets and holdings of Paul Manafort and Rick Gates from multiple different sources going back years and years and years. They've got their loan applications. They've got other kinds of loan applications. They've got credit line applications. They've got it all. The government, in this document unsealed by the court tonight, they argue that the case should be treated as a complex case. It shouldn't be rushed to a conclusion under the constitutional requirements that you get a speedy trial. It doesn't seem like they had a hard fight on that. They note in one footnote that Manafort's counsel has agreed that the case should be treated as a complex case. But in making their argument to the court for why that should happen, the special counsel explains that this is a criminal case in which the government will be relying on, and I quote, hundreds of thousands of documents, quote, both from the United States and abroad. And in an assertion that is probably blowing like a cold wind through the White House tonight, the special counsel's office also asserts that their case against Manafort and Gates will include not only bank records, but also tax filings. So we don't know exactly if the president's campaign chairman is wearing an ankle bracelet tonight. We think he might be. We know that he has been released to home confinement under a high-intensity supervision program. The special counsel's office has now declared that Paul Manafort and another Trump campaign official have a history of receiving millions of dollars from Russian oligarchs. And they say their overseas bank accounts are shared with a Russian national who elsewhere we believe to have bragged that he had a Russian military intelligence background. And the special counsel has put Gates and Manafort, and by extension, anybody else involved in this case, has put them all on notice now that the special counsel's efforts to track this stuff down includes them going through both foreign and domestic bank records and also tax filings. They've got their taxes. So these documents just unsealed by the court tonight. We'll get a little help a little later on this hour as to whether or not this is a normal-looking declaration from prosecutors. But just looking at this from a layman's perspective, A, this is a lot of new information, and B, this seems brutal.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.